points out the mayor, who has sat on LAFCO, who can give us kind of an overview in the context for what LAFCO does and how it's operating. And then I'll ask each one of you to introduce yourself to when we just move through the agenda. So Carla,
thank you. LAFCO, Local Agency Formation Commission. Everybody just says LAFCO. It was created by the legislature back in 1963, and the purpose of it was to actually make certain that there was an orderly pattern of growth. And particularly that applied to boundaries. And when we're talking about boundaries, whether it be sanitary districts, county boundaries, and incorporated versus incorporated boundaries. And in 2000, almost 40 years after LAFCO was started, there was an act, the Knox-Hertzberg, I never get the order right, Act, and that was adopted by the state legislature. And that actually made it law that there would be orderly formation of the development of local government districts. And there is a LAFCO in every county in the state of California. So it's really pretty widespread. There are 7 members of LAFCO. There are 2 council members. Currently I'm serving, and so is Gary Phillips, thank you, of San Rafael. 2 members of the Board of Supervisors, Damon Connolly and Judy Arnold. And then we have 2 special district members. Dennis Rodoni is one, and Craig Murray is the other, and then 1 public member, and that is Jeff Blanchfield, and he's from Mill Valley. He's retired from BCDC. LAFCO, a lot of people consider the most powerful commission in the state of California, because LAFCO is the only commission that doesn't require any kind of referendum, and it also does not have to allow for a protest vote. And this particular issue came up not too long ago in southern Marin, where there was the spill, and with SASM and the different sanitary districts and what have you, and there was a legislation from Jared Huffman to encourage the consolidation of these districts. And it was very controversial. A lot of members of LAFCO felt that this was really appropriate to be able to save money, to just be more efficient, that it would be a more efficient type of agency if it were consolidated. Not every member of the commission felt that way, and we had a lot of attendance, a lot of reaction from the representatives of those agencies that did not want to consolidate. When it came to the very end, after a couple of years of back and forth, the commission voted 4-3, was that close, to allow it to have those constituents vote on the issue. We actually had the power to force the consolidation, and 4 of us just didn't feel, for whatever personal reasons, that it was appropriate. And so it went to the public, to the jurisdictions, and they all voted to not consolidate. Now, had it been left up to LAFCO and had the vote been 3-4 the other way, they would have been consolidated, and there wouldn't have been allowed a protest vote at all. That's just the way it goes. A lot of people don't realize this. So at any rate, though, it does really promote more efficient works of agencies. It's very helpful. Most of the things that we see are where people are in a septic tank and they want to annex into a municipal district onto sewer. And that's where you see a lot of this annexation taking place. There are boundary changes where certain areas might annex into a neighboring city. There are different things that take place. I would say from my personal perspective, the issue with the question of the consolidation of the sanitary districts was probably the most controversial of anything, and I've been sitting on it for several years now, and that was really pretty controversial. So hopefully that gives you an overview of what LAFCO does.
Excellent, thank you. So you're set up now with the idea that you could just go alphabetical. If you would introduce yourself, the district, and then that general sense of what's your interest in LAFCO, what's your background and experience. If we all were voting, why would you want us to be voting for you? Kind of that general thing. And you each have, I'm going to set it for 4 minutes. If you need an additional minute at the end or so, you can do that, and then that'll give us time for Q&A. So, John, welcome.
My name is John Carapia. I live in Belvedere with my wife, 38 years, and I have 2 children, 2 adults, I like to say. I started out in the 70s after I graduated from San Francisco State as a Muni bus driver. And I worked for the Muni for 6.5 years. Then I went to the water department, and I started as a meter reader, an inspector, and finally a senior inspector. And I retired 6 years ago, after 35 years working for the city of San Francisco. When I moved to Belvedere 20 years ago, my annual sewer rate was about $500 a year, and currently it's $2,000. So I was talking to people, and somebody said to me, well, why don't you put your money where your mouth is? So I went on to the sewer board and ran unopposed. And the further I got into Sanitary 5, that I'm one of the board members and secretary, the more appalled I got that last year we spent $320,000 in legal fees. And as I read about Ross Valley and how they're spending a couple $100,000 fighting with San Rafael over the San Quentin contract, I realized that Marin has population of approximately 268,000, which is about 1/3 of San Francisco. And I worked for the water department, and part of my job was part of the sewer. And San Francisco, with 3 times the population, has 1 water and sewer department, Department of Public Works. It's, to me, it's appalling that we're spending this kind of money to have managers and to have attorneys, and the refrain is local control. Well, if there's a sewer spill, you know, you can call into a switchboard, and they're going to call the local people there that are working at the treatment center. And so this whole idea of local control, for me, has been very, very faulty. I also was on the Marin Civil Grand Jury from 09-10, and we did 6 reports. One of them happened to be on the SMART train, so when they were talking earlier about the SMART, I'm going, and because we looked at it in 10. But we also looked at some of the sanitary districts and looked at the various boards and commissions. We did a report on the boards and commissions of Marin County. And you know, I understand that Marin is diverse, and I understand that some of the sewer treatment, is just collection, and they're not on pumps, and we are on pumps, and some of them have do treatment, some don't, and some have older pipes and newer pipes. And so, but the problem is we would not have the United States, we would not have a national highway system if we took the attitude, oh, well, you have mountains on your area, and you have desert over here. At some point, we need to combine these districts and get into some efficiencies. You know, this isn't we're not against each other, and there needs to be a combining of this. I know that we talked about that it didn't work from LAFCO. Well, the political muscle wasn't there. But it's up to you as citizens to sit there and say, you know, enough is enough. I personally support a use-based system like San Francisco has. San Francisco, if you use 10 units of water, it is a multiple of how much water you use that you get a bill. The bill goes out every 2 months with your water bill. It's not on your property taxes. It's on your water bill where it belongs, because it's not really a property tax. All the people that deduct their sewer bill are in, you know, this is erroneous. That's not it's for a service. It's not a tax, and it should be collected, and it should be a reflection of how much water you actually use. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. You got another minute if you want to just.
Oh, okay. I can talk for 2 days.
Oh, okay, yeah. We'll go on to Justin. We'll
And
save
my
for-
wife much
No,
rather
okay,
go
we'll
hear
come
that.
back for Q&A. Justin, welcome.
Hi, Susan, thank you for having us. My name is Justin Kai. I've been living in Marin since 2011, and I've been serving on the Marin Community Services District for now going into my second year. So a lot of this is relatively new to me, but I've always had a great interest in public service, and when getting the opportunity to serve for LAFCO, I had some understanding of what LAFCO is, what they do, and I do know that it's probably the most important agency that most people don't know about. In learning more about LAFCO, my initial understanding was basically most of what Carla has already talked about in terms of promoting orderly growth. But one of some additional tenets that I recently learned about have prompted me to have more of an interest in being involved with LAFCO. And one of them was, I was glad to find out, was that one of the primary charges of LAFCO is to really ensure that they represent the best interests of the public and of the residents of Marin, and not necessarily of the agency that has appointed them to be on LAFCO. I think that's really important, especially given our current political issues, political climate, where many residents feel there's a significant disconnect between what we would like to have happen as residents and what our political leaders essentially try to enact. The other tenet that I learned about, and I don't know if it's more of a recent action given the rising costs of home ownership or just housing in California and in particular in Marin. But LAFCO is also charged with promotion of affordable housing. And that interests me because I feel development in general, but in particular affordable housing, needs to be done responsibly. If it's not, I think we all understand that there's grave fiscal and social consequences to services in the communities that exist that can have lasting impacts. So learning of these two tenets really got me interested, because the first thing I asked was, well, these are two things that you're supposed to do, but often they seem to very much conflict with each other. So, you know, how does an agency such as LAFCO deal with what I imagine would be kind of an inner turmoil, you know, looking to promote both issues. So that's where I feel it's a great opportunity for myself to, one, be eligible to run for LAFCO, and then also be happy and honored to serve in that regard, because in the time that I've been in public service, I've gotten to know a great deal of residents, not just in my community, but throughout Marin, and I feel it's very important to have an attitude that, you know, it's funny, Marin is composed of lots of different areas, and everyone feels, as John was saying, very strong in regards to keeping their independence, keeping local control. However, I think an attitude that's really important to have, and also in regards to LAFCO, is that if something is not being done properly, or planned well in one part of the county, it will eventually affect the entire county. So that's where I think LAFCO can have great influence in not just promoting orderly growth, but promoting it responsibly and doing it in a healthy manner for the long term.
Great, thank you. Lou, welcome.
Okay,
You get to go
Susan,
next.
thank you for arranging this forum tonight, and members, I appreciate giving us a chance to talk with you. My name is Lou Caius. I live in Mill Valley. I've lived there for over 30 years. My daughter went to schools through the Mill Valley public system. I am a lifelong Bay Area resident. I've always worked in high tech, and I still do. And Carla, to some degree, took some of my thunder away or led me into this because I'm president of the SASM Board of Directors. I joined the SASM board after the 2008 spills, so I wasn't in place when they happened. But I did come in shortly after, and I've been president of SASM for the last 4 years, president of the board of SASM for the last 4 years. I also sit on the Almonte Sanitary District board, which I also joined after the spills. And I'm secretary-treasurer at Almonte Sanitary. So for the last 7 years, I have worked diligently on both boards. The situations that occurred in 2008 that led up to the spills have been changed. They were changed by us locally, appreciating the fact that we didn't want to spoil our environment, that there were modifications that needed to be made in how sewage is handled in Southern Marin, and those changes have been made and continue to be made. So as it relates to experience, I was on the opposite side of LAFCO when the forced consolidation was being put forward. I was one of those people who dealt with LAFCO members individually, who spoke before the LAFCO board several times, opposed to the consolidation. And as Carla mentioned, at that time, it was a very close vote to even allow the residents, the constituents of Mill Valley, to vote on whether we would want to be consolidated. At the time, there were 2 representatives from Southern Marin on the LAFCO board. Ida Asbo from Mill Valley and Kate Sears, Supervisor Kate Sears from Sausalito. Both of them have since left LAFCO. So right now, there is no representation from Southern Marin on the LAFCO board. I think that's a major failing. I think that it's a unique area of the country and of Marin, and there needs to be some representation on LAFCO from Southern Marin because of the importance that LAFCO has had in the past, and probably will have in the future. And I went to the recent planning session that LAFCO had, the annual planning session, as I've done a couple of years. The consolidation of the districts is still on the LAFCO agenda. It's planned to be reviewed again in 2017, I believe. So this is still an issue that is very relevant, that is very meaningful. And as Carla mentioned, the last time it was brought before the voters turned it down soundly. It was clear that the issues that were perceived with the sewage districts in Southern Marin really weren't the case and didn't justify that kind of consolidation. And it's not consolidation that we are against. We have had internal discussions about consolidating some of the districts that are there in a sensible, rational way. What was put forward before was neither sensible nor really rational if you knew the facts. So, a little bit of aside. So my reasons for running, for wanting to be on the LAFCO board, are representation primarily. You know, we need to have Southern Marin represented on the LAFCO board. I've got experience with LAFCO. I have experience in the public sector. Again, as the SASM board, Almonte, being a resident of Mill Valley for a long time. And, you know, I really believe that when you have a government entity who takes action, there are many voices that often are heard by that public entity. Some of those voices are really interested, and fewer number are somewhat informed. And then still a fewer number are involved. But the people who really get pushed aside sometimes are the people who are directly impacted. And just like with LAFCO, perhaps with ABAG, perhaps with other groups, I think all too often those voices of the people who are impacted aren't really heard that well. And my desire in this case is to, again, present the voice of Southern Marin, where the Southern Marin community would be impacted, and make sure that voice is heard on LAFCO. So I appreciate your consideration, and look forward to your questions.
Great, thank you very much. To you, Pam.
I'm Pamela Meggs. I'm going to pass around my LAFCO application. If you see, it's easier to see it that way. But I'm going to start. I'm a Bay Area native from Berkeley. I've been living in Ross Valley for about 25 years in Fairfax. I'm also a nurse in the community for over 30 years. I have about 20 years of community leadership experience, and most of that has been in Fairfax. I have been the past chair and past member of the Fairfax Planning Commission. I also worked 10 years on the general plan. So I have a lot of experience with all the elements of the general plan, including zoning, municipal ordinances, regulations required by state and local laws, and all the criteria required for creating and updating a general plan, including mapping. I also have been on the Fairfax Advisory Committee for the Fairfax General Plan. I'm currently on the North Bay Watershed Association, a voting member for the Ross Valley Sanitary District. I recently was re-elected last year. I received the most votes for the Ross Valley Sanitary District. And that district covers about 50,000 residents, I believe, with about 14,000 households. I am also on the Larkspur Landing Development Committee for the Ross Valley Sanitary District, and I have been the former representative for LAFCO a few years ago through RVSB. I'm a long-term Sierra Club member, MCL, and also the Women's Political Action Committee. I've done the Environmental Forum Leadership Program. And currently I'm also on the CMSA, Central Marin Sanitary Agency Commission, as a board member for the JPA. Those are my qualifications. So why would I want to be a member of LAFCO? I hear some thoughts and voices too that it's very true. LAFCO is an agency that a lot of people don't even understand what it is or what it does. It has a lot of power. And so my love is for the community and the land, and my love is to serve the community as best I can. So with that, and all my planning background, I have a very broad and larger picture. And so I also have the ability to work collaboratively with other agencies. After we rehired a new manager, I went to all the municipalities. I created working groups so we could get back on track with our agency being more open and transparent. So my vision is for the greatest good for the greatest number. And there's a lot happening on LAFCO. Mr. Banning in the past, who I've had some really great discussions with, there was not this assertive energy around LAFCO. There's a new manager on board. He is really moving quickly. He wants municipal service reviews done. He has a broader scope of what he sees, how LAFCO should be functioning. And so that's where I decided to jump in. I feel very comfortable working in planning. And so I also went to the strategic retreat that LAFCO just had, and yes, they are going to review the small water districts in West Marin. They're going to review 3 or 4 sanitary agencies. I just think it would be really important for my experience and myself to be part of that group. And some of the interests I'm looking at right now is urban planning boundaries, urban service boundaries, so that it's clear to all who is or should be in those public service areas, such as unincorporated areas as well. So I feel strongly that special districts play an important role in Marin's governance. I would be devoted and diligent, a diligent voice for all of you. Thank you.
All right, well, let's give a round of applause for these great opening comments. I think what we'll do then is just open it it up for Q&A with this group. So Carla, since you're there, do you want to be the moderator, just as you see hands and kind of to call on 1, 2, 3, and we'll take those. And if you can be clear, if you do have a question, whether you're directing it to one person or if you want short answers from everyone. But I mean, let's really work for precision and shortness so we can get as many questions as possible.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, well, I think we have to leave it soon. So
Good.
thank you for taking my question. In the future, there may be a greater split or apparent conflict of interest between the corridor and West Marin. Very different vested interests there, and we all have enjoyed how the protections in the West, that land is protected for the most part. And I see some jockeying, some positioning to pit the corridor against that protected property in terms of their needs and services. And I wondered if anyone cares to rise to that bait, or if anyone cares to comment on that in terms of the way we run the county.
Anybody like to comment on that?
I'll take it.
Okay.
I think if I understand your issue correctly, it speaks directly to what I was saying in my opening remarks. I think that there are a lot of voices that come into play. I think in the corridor you're talking about, there are a lot of people who use the corridor. That's where the bulk of the population of Marin is most active, where we live. But at the point where you start impacting the lifestyles and the property and the futures of the people who live outside the corridor, I think you have to really give very strong consideration to those issues and the impacts to those people who are in West Marin. I don't think you want to have a situation where you're degrading their lifestyle, degrading what they've come to expect and love, necessarily always for the good of the masses. And so certainly the masses, the corridor, if you will, has a voice. That voice should be heard. But I think the strong voice needs to be those people who are impacted. And I have not looked at the issue directly, but certainly I think West Marin would have a strong case to make.
Yes. Oh, I was just going to go.
Yeah.
Did somebody have a comment?
Or maybe somebody else on the
I
board
just
wanted
want
to.
to chime in. You know, in the strategic retreat at LAFCO, they did talk about protecting ag land more, and that was one of the deficits that within that group that day that they were starting to say, well, LAFCO is about open space and protecting sprawl. So what is in place right now to protect those areas? So that might be an avenue to open up to look at. Yes,
I'd just also like to comment on it. And if I understand what you're talking about in particular, Carolyn, is the discussion between the understanding that growth must occur and that it has to occur somewhere. Personally, I question that first understanding. Why, especially in regards to Marin, where many of our residents moved here because of the frankly quiet suburban lifestyle that Marin embodies, especially compared to most other counties in the Bay Area. Do we need to grow at the sake of losing what is West Marin and also the Eastern Corridor, the 101 corridor? I don't think that we need to. I don't think that everywhere needs to grow and increase to look more and more, say, like San Francisco or anything like that. So in that initial regard, I question that first tenet of that. Well, growth must happen. So.
Well, I know we've got lots of questions, so.
Yes, so please.
Yeah, I was going to ask John what your vision is in terms of consolidating sanitary districts. San Francisco is 5 miles by 7 miles. Marin County is 30 miles by, 20 miles. So geographically, it's very difficult to, besides everybody demanding local control, I'm an educator and I've been looking at consolidating school districts in Marin County for years, and it's just never going to happen because of local control issues. But I wanted to know what your
Well,
vision
no,
is.
first and foremost, I understand what you're saying about school districts. School districts really impact the housing value of the respective districts. So that is definitely the third rail to talk about consolidating school districts. In terms of sanitary districts, to have all this repetitive bureaucracy and is ludicrous over the guise of local control. I think that's a word that goes out. And I mean, do we really need to have local control over the sewer district? I mean, there's sanitary. If you have a spill or a leak, you know, you send a crew out, but you don't need to have 23 different managers providing sewer services. Or, you know, you can keep the same number of workers involved in it, but in terms of managers, boards, lawyers, you know, it's a horrible business model. I'm watching where I live in Belvedere, all these homes being torn down and being built two-story homes on the Belvedere Lagoon, and what I'm seeing is the city workers there. Each time a home goes from, you know, this much to that much, they get that much more income in the city, and they put it into staff. They have more and more staff, and it's more and more restrictive what you can do. If you put a water heater in, you need a permit. And all this staff they're like at the other end of our quality of life. So what I'm trying to say is that if we can streamline some of these things and still provide the services, I think that's what I'd like to see.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
On the consolidation question, Mr. Carapiet and is it Mix?
Yes.
Mr. Kiss.
Caius, yes.
Caius had an opinion. Justin, I didn't hear if you had an opinion, and if you don't have an opinion yet on the consolidation issue, Ms. Mix, I'd appreciate your opinion on this consolidation issue. And before then, I'd love to hear what you would say about this new management in the LAFCO, who's apparently a mover and shaker. And to tell you the truth, when I hear about a new agency head that's a real mover and shaker and can really get things done, I want to get out the
Well,
car.
it can be a good.
But is part of that new manager's agenda consolidate?
Well, I'll talk about consolidation after I talk about it. So I've been watching LAFCO since I got on the district, which was 2010. Being in planning and understanding probably a little bit more, and then I was the rep. And at that time, there just wasn't, well, except for SASM, which started to heat up. I think that was, what, 11 or 12, somewhere around there. But other than that, it was pretty like they you know, were going through some of the motions that they had to do. Comparing it to now, I see a real strategic plan laid out. And there's already been a water study done now for West Marin to look at consolidating the water districts. There's already a timeline on what else that LAFCO is going to review. So I didn't see that before. And I mean, it could be just its time, and with what's happened in government, things not being reviewed, you know, that the agencies really need to start looking at how are we doing governance for our communities. Okay, so going to consolidation, you know, I've looked at studies about consolidation. Yes, there's a local control issue. There's also an issue on how your taxes are used and how you feel you can trust the agency you're working with, a smaller agency. The Ross Valley Sanitary District, we did a financial study for consolidation. It was like $120,000 just to do that one study. We found very little benefit from the cost analysis to change it. So, you know, here we are 4 years later. We are going to be reviewed, which I think is good. I think we all need to kind of look at our governance and how adequately we are providing services. Maybe we could do something better, whatever. But until I see a study that tells me, and the community wants that kind of particular part of government, then I don't push consolidation. You know, and we've had spills. We are really doing well right now. We have gone 180 degrees. So, and actually when I was a rep, I saw some issues with SASM that sort of pinpointed to me that I didn't really, I did not support SASM's consolidation. I actually spoke a couple of times.
And then, wanted Justin to have a chance, if you wanted to answer
Sure.
that.
I think consolidation makes sense on a service by service situation. Meaning, I don't think you can just have a blanket statement that consolidation is the best thing and how everything should go. For example, in terms of the sewer district, from my understanding, I agree with you, John, that honestly, I don't think residents are really concerned about having local control about flushing their toilets. I believe, as long as services are done and done well, I think that's what residents care about. And if there's opportunities to reduce redundancies in either staff and what staff is doing at multiple agencies, I think it would make sense to streamline and be able to use funds more efficiently for taxpayers and also for the services provided. Now, when you talk about consolidation, a heated topic is consolidation regarding fire services. And on the Marinwood Community Services District, we have a small fire station for, single fire station for Marinwood. We continue to look at the pros and cons of potentially consolidating into Novato County or San Rafael. But with fire service, I think to residents, it's much more important. That's much more apparent regarding the benefits of local control in that sense. So I think it's going back, it's really just about each individual service and whether it really makes sense to consolidate in each case.
Okay, Peter?
Yeah, I'm wondering how you guys interface with the supervisors. I mean, there's another group that has tremendous power in the county, and you guys have some considerable power also, potentially. Are you guys on the same track, or sometimes are the supervisors trying to tell you guys how to run LAFCO, or and are you kind of like talking back to them? I don't know how it works, so could you tell me?
Okay.
Just having recently gone through, Marinwood is part of District 1, which had a recent change from Susan Adams to David Connolly. With Susan Adams, my interaction was not so positive because most of her agenda was contrary to what I felt was best for our community, as most residents also did. Now with Damon as our supervisor, I've been keeping a great open dialogue with him, talking about a multitude of issues that our community is dealing with on a regular basis. I think it's important to have a good relationship with not just your own district supervisor, but potentially the rest of the supervisors as well. And I've had limited interaction with the rest of them, but have had respectful conversations and everything as well.
Who's more powerful if there gets to be a conflict? Who wins, supervisors or you guys?
Are you asking me, Peter?
Anybody.
Well, Carla, with you having experience
Yeah, Carla's
there,
good at that,
I think
That's a lot. That's the one good thing about the LAFCO board, is that there is no majority of representation. So 2 supervisors can take a position, but 5 other people can take a different position and the supervisors don't win. So that's why I think that one of the virtues of the LAFCO board and the way it's selected is that it's fair representation and that it isn't outweighed. I mean, the 2 mayors or the 2 council members are selected by Marin County Mayors and Council Members group, and then the special services, the special districts, are elected by their own constituents. So, and then it's the commission that, that appoints the single public service board, and the two supervisors are elected by their fellow supervisors. So there's really fair representation. And in my experience, I really, you know, I've seen plenty where the two supervisors don't necessarily agree with each other. Yes.
Steve. So this is a two-part question, and I'd like you to kind of be brief on both of them, and I'd like each one of you to answer. First of all, just making the observation, most of you are with sanitary districts, Justin's with community service district. There's also fire district people as well who are up for the position. So each one of you are potentially clients of this efficiency. By clients, I mean you're going to be merged. So what I would like you to address is your values. What is efficient? What is efficiently serving the people? Second of all, I know we pay different rates for services. So if we are to merge districts, how would you resolve the issues of funding? Okay, like we pay more in Marinwood per parcel than they do in San Rafael, for example, and that's been an issue. So I don't know how this merger stuff works. So if you could just...
Well, first off, as far as the merger of sanitary districts, I think that I said that I would go from a where you live. If you live on this side of the street, it's $500. If you live on this side of the street, it's $2,000. I think is a ridiculous system. I think that it should be relative to how much you use the services. In terms of duplication of services, you know, when I read that Ross Valley is suing San Rafael because of the loss of the contract with San Quentin, it makes me ill. When I see it at my district, 30 years ago, Point Tiburon opened up in 1985, and for 30 years, my district litigated with Point Tiburon, and we finally settled this last month because I told the attorney that this isn't a divorce, make a settlement, you know, please. And so when I see these kinds of things going on with all these attorneys suing this district and that district, I'm going, you know, what is that doing to me as a ratepayer in anything? So that, on that note. And then also, as far as the fire districts go, you know, do you really need all these chiefs? You know, you need a certain amount of battalion people, you need firemen, just like you need policemen, but how many fire chiefs do you need? I mean, Mill Valley for years had a combined police and fire. About 6 years ago, they did two things. They said we need parking meters, which brings in, I don't know, 150,000 a year, and we need a separate police chief and a fire chief. And he said, because it's demoralizing to the firemen that they won't be able to become a chief. Well, you know, I boycotted Mill Valley because I don't think that they should have put parking meters in. I mean, I find that just ridiculous. So I think from a quality of life point of view, that we need to cut back on all these districts and all these things and give it back to us. I'm running on this because I just want these issues put forth. I don't expect to win, but I want the discussion out there. Thank you.
You're down the road.
Sure.
I think you're going to need to be a little
I'm
shorter
sorry.
than that.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, you know what,
Well, I had a minute from the last one.
Yeah, that's right, you had the, I'm gonna set this for a minute, if you can just give concise answers, because we've got a lot of other questions.
Okay.
So,
So very briefly, in terms of what value I bring, one thing that I've noticed, and this is somewhat common in a lot of public agencies, being at a younger point in my life, I feel there's very much important perspectives that I can bring to the table in that regard. And again, just being highly in communication with local residents, and of not, again, of just my area, but throughout Marin, I think is important to always continue to have. Regarding how to deal with the fluctuations in costs regarding services. Again, each service is going to be have its own issues to deal with, but I'll use fire again. I'll be really quick. In terms of fire, Marinwood has looked at consolidating with other agencies, and people have had concern that our rates would most likely go up. Most likely they would, but our services would also increase as well, considering that San Rafael has a higher level of fire and paramedic and medical services as part of their offerings than Marin would have. So I think it's something that would eventually need to happen, but there's, with an additional cost, most likely there would be an additional gain. So.
Okay, to your first point about different kinds of districts and not just sanitary districts, I really strongly believe in outreach. So last night at this time,
Excuse me, the question was, what do you consider efficient, and how would you deal with the differences in rates? Sorry.
Okay, I thought that was the second part, but that's okay. I'll use sanitary as an example of that. The Almonte Sanitary District is all on hills, so we don't have to pump any of the effluent anywhere. We don't have the charges for the pumping. It's all gravity feed. So as a result, and I should add, we have no admin staff. So we run very lean. As a result, we're very efficient. We don't have the same cost structure as a Richardson Bay or Corte Madera, who have to pump their effluent across flat areas in highly developed suburban areas, and who also have a higher admin staff. So we personally don't believe that in the consolidation plan that was offered before, there was an adequate consideration of the fact that there are different requirements and different demands that also have a different rate structure that's required and related. And further on the consolidation point, SASM has studied the possibility of even doing something like shutting down the SASM processing plant and consolidating with Central Marin. We looked at that. We talked with Central Marin, and we hired a consultant to do that study. $100 million, what it would cost to consolidate the Southern Marin districts with the Central Marin districts. $100 million isn't supportable. So there are very pragmatic issues that come into play when you start really considering the consolidation issue. And we've looked at it. And lastly, I'll just add as a kind of an advertisement, since 2008, there have been no spills. Everybody got the attention, they got the news in 2008, and certainly LAFCO gave a lot of attention, but the changes that happened locally since that time have resulted in higher processing rates, higher flow through the plant with no spills, all on a local basis, all on a local level. So you can't dismiss that when you start thinking about these issues.
So for the Ross Valley Sanitary District, my passion is accountability and transparency and integrity, and it's been a rough road. And I am a hawk on finances and accountability on many levels in the district. So that's pretty much all I want to say about that. I hope that kind of answered your question. If your electeds are not doing their job in those areas, then the community needs to know that. So I really went after legal fees at the Ross Valley Sanitary District. I was on the financial committee for 2 years. I'm on the financial committee now for CMSA. And I'm telling you, public money gets wasted easily. So that's pretty much where when I talk about this, I just, the fire consolidation, I think that's what, I'm a nurse in a hospital, and I've seen reorganization, and I'm not sure consolidating till it's bare bone is such a great thing for health and safety. So for fire, I would be really careful and cautious on how you do any of these tightening and squeezing. That's the one thing that I would not hate to see if somebody, a call couldn't get there in time or something of that nature.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, and also quickly, our district is putting out surveys. So that's another way to find out what is your community seeing and why.
And if I could just add, one of the issues that LAFCO did deal with was the annexing of Sausalito Fire into Southern Marin Fire. And that was another controversial issue that we had to deal with. Clayton.
Two things. One thing about the consolidation is I've been following particularly TCSD, where we've had gigantic rate increases because of the problems at the Sausalito plant. What we have here is we have plant-specific modalities. We have a plant for this place, plant for this geographic, another plant for that. And it just strikes me that what you really want to do is maintain some kind of local control over the plants and draw your districts so that they actually reflect the feed into a specific plant, and have that basically plant to have a kind of local board of directors to manage it, because each one of these plants are in various states of deterioration, and they're all facing these federal lawsuits that I think that from the EPA that are causing various different kinds of rebuilds. So the rate structures are not going to be consolidatable across the county because of that fact. The other issue that we're looking at is this move, as you talked about, moving to a flow-based rate structure. And the question I'd like to ask is, I know that you recommended putting it on your water bill. We've addressed that issue down at TCSD, where it kind of rejected that on the water bill to kind of keep it as an annual item or semi-annual with our property taxes. But how do you guys feel about moving to a flow base? And if you're going to move to a flow base, how would you implement it with the multifamily aspect of it? Have you thought much about how you would do an implementation of
So
moving
since this
to a
is specifically
flow-based?
flow, if you could limit your responses to 1 minute, so we can also get a couple of other questions.
Right, I spent 35 years in the Public Utilities Commission, and that's how all of San Francisco does it. So it's not like it's reinventing the wheel. The rate structure is there. All they have to do is overlay San Francisco's rate structure over Marin Municipal Water's use structure and sit there and say, hey, this will work, or we need to tweak it this way or that way. It's not some $200 million consultant saying this is how to do it. Go 18 miles south of here and go to San Francisco, bring one of those managers over here and say, okay, how would it work? Would it work or it wouldn't work? And look at all of the Marins, look at their water usage, overlay that rate structure and see what happens.
Okay.
Would anybody else like to comment?
I would. First off, Marin, and Southern Marin especially, is not San Francisco. The issues related to processing sewage in Mill Valley and Sausalito and Tiburon and Belvedere are not the same issues that you have in a highly urban, dense, well-planned, laid-out environment in San Francisco. So I don't think you can compare those two because they really don't make a good comparison. Point A. Point B, the city of Mill Valley, and I worked very closely with them on this, the city of Mill Valley has implemented a flow-based charging system for sewage. Okay, that was put into place about 2 years ago. And frankly, the SASM is composed of 6 member agencies: Almonte, Alto, Homestead, Richardson Bay, TCSD, and Mill Valley. Mill Valley clearly the one that has the most resources. So what we all agreed to and supported was that Mill Valley could take the lead in that because they had the resources to do it. They also had a lot of businesses that were involved where flow becomes really an issue. Businesses use more water than homes. So I worked closely with the city manager and the city council in Mill Valley, city of Mill Valley, to put a flow-based system in. That's in place now. 2 years, Mill Valley considers it a success. They've tweaked it a little bit. And I recently had a conversation with the city manager and the finance director of Mill Valley to see how much of that could be adopted now by the other districts. So that is something that has already been done as the first part. It's something we looked at closely and we'll continue to look at closely, and it may be implemented.
So we've got time for probably 2 more questions or so, and then I want to give you a chance to do something wrapping up. So,
Okay.
yeah. So Carlos,
Yeah.
My question relates to the fact that I found out after going to a LAFCO session on what LAFCO was all about, is that one of their primary goals there's an exception to that preservation apparently in the lower part of their, I guess, value statement or mission statement, where it indicates that as long as it doesn't impact the proper, I guess, sustainable growth of affordable housing. And so I wondered how you would respond to that if you're put in the position, like for example, we have Silvera Ranch across the way from us, where they've been fighting for 50 years over the idea of people trying to get access to their property. And I spoke to them about it and found out that when San Rafael was trying to acquire them, that the reason that San Rafael was trying to do it was they were going to try and do a condemnation where they were not protected under the Williams Act, and therefore the condemnation, because they weren't under the Williams Act, would allow them to purchase the land at a much lower cost because of the valuations are lower for agriculture than if you're not under Williams Act protection. So when San Rafael tried to do this, they opted out of Williams Act protection, which increased the value of their property then for tax purposes, and then San Rafael backed out of the deal because they said they couldn't afford the property. So I'd like
let's open it
to,
up for a chance to respond
Yeah.
to that.
Yeah.
Anyone?
Anybody like to respond?
So, I'll try to think about what your actual question was. The crux of what it seems like you're talking about is the variances or exceptions that are often made for the sake of promoting affordable housing. I think that is something that should honestly be looked at much more closely, because this whole attitude that is shared by most of our local government, as well as obviously California, is that affordable housing at any and all cost is good and necessary, and I don't believe that's necessarily the case, especially when most affordable housing, how it's constructed today, is through tax-exempt means, meaning you are creating large swaths of housing that are supposedly affordable, but they're not paying into the local tax revenues and tax structures. And if anyone doesn't see the inherent problem with that, I don't know how to make that any more plain. So in terms of how LAFCO should deal with it, that's something that I would closely look at in terms of, does whatever proposition or proposal make sense from a truly fiscally sustainable means?
I'd like to add that, you can be very creative in ways to protect land. There are land trusts, there's just, other opportunities to look at, and LAFCO comes from the place to protect open space. When sprawl was spreading through California when it first started, that's one of the principles they had, was to protect against urban sprawl. So I just feel there's some other avenues that need to be addressed here. And if you look at the malt's an example. They have a land trust that's locked. It's really locked.
Okay.
Yes.
Hi, Hutch Turner. LAFCO being the powerful agency that it is, I am curious as if there is a recognized metric for rating the performance of LAFCO itself. I know there are several subdivisions, but most of us, particularly those who work hard and don't have time to come to meetings like this, we look for something that's not 125 pages long. We look for something that's maybe 2 or 3 pages long, readily accessible, and some hard numbers that we can see in black and white in simplified form. And my question is, what is that metric? Anybody can tackle this fine, but what would be a metric? How have you thought about rating your own performance in terms of numbers?
You were on LAFCO.
Okay. I get that. Great. I think that from the period of time that I've spent on LAFCO, basically things that have changed from a pragmatic point of view have been based on common sense. And I'm trying to think of any particular application that has proven to have been too costly or ineffective or in some way violated rights of others. And I really can't think of any. I think that the one thing that I find difficult, and this is just from my own personal philosophy, is the power that LAFCO has that prevents a protest vote, not allowing a referendum. I'm uneasy about that. I just feel that that's kind of not our constitutional right. But as long as I've been sitting on it, no one has as a whole exercised that right. So I think it really is really for the good of the community. Right now what's happening, and just to add something to what Pam had said, is our new director is real proactive, and he's doing a water study, starting from West Marin, then over to Novato, working his way south with every water district that there is to figure out the maximum quantity of water available, how many households it can serve, if it's an agricultural area, the amount of water. Stinson Beach, I think there's that ordinarily their water, that they only use 10% of the water. So he is doing this study, which I think is going to be phenomenal in that it's going to really quantify the cap on development. That, you know, they're pushing all this development and nobody's looking at the water and how much water can be provided. And this study will show it, and I think it's going to benefit every single person in Marin County and every district he is looking at. And it's a very ambitious task that he is undertaken. Yes?
Yes, and I hope that would include Marin City.
Absolutely.
Because the reason I'm saying, with Marinwood successfully stopping the county with the affordable housing, Strawberry, Tam, now the county, the Board of Supervisors are looking at dumping a minimum of the 600 to 700 units in Marin City. That's their goal, without any studies on the infrastructure of Marin City, the one-way in, the one-way out, not to mention the sanitary district and the pipes under the shopping center, etc. So I hope that LAFCO would really be taking, if it gets that far, a real serious look at the proposed plans by the county of Marin in terms of dumping that in Marin City.
Right, because absolutely, and this is, I really supported when he brought up this particular task, that we really need this all over the county, because the development has just sort of been doled out very unwieldy, without a lot of thought, without community acceptance, and all of a sudden you see 600 units and not enough water. I mean, it's ludicrous. So I think this is something that is very, very good and will benefit everybody. And in that respect, when, you know, the question was asked that we have somebody on board, you know, a new. I will say that Keene Simons has really gone out of his way to approach every council, every special district. There have been special interest groups that he goes to. He really doesn't turn down any invitation, and only tonight it was a sticky situation because he would have been happy to come, but somebody here is going to be probably, you know, doing his performance review.
Yes,
And
if I
so-
can just add to that, he was very pleased that we were going to be having this event. And for all of you to know, he's also agreed to come to the Marin Coalition. That's the luncheon meeting that happens first Wednesday of every month. So Keene Simmons will be there on April 1st, speaking about LAFCO and kind of the structure of LAFCO. I know it's not, I don't think it's formally a JPA, but the way it kind of operates, the way a joint powers authority would be. And then the other speaker, because Marin Coalition often looks at different points of view to bring those together, is going to be Trish Seifer, who some of you have heard, who wrote the document on a citizen's guide to JPA. So it should be a really good luncheon for those of you who want to have a chance to meet Keene or just get your own sense of him and what they're talking about in terms of being a go-getter. Wednesday, April 1st. And I've got information I can get to all of you on that.
Right, and one thing, if I could add to that, Susan, the JPAs, the Joint Power Authorities, what Keene is supporting statewide is that every JPA in our county registers with LAFCO. Right now, you can go to the county and say, how many JPAs are there? They don't have a clue.
Really?
Not a clue. And he is actually working on legislation so that they all will be registered with LAFCO, that there will be like a summary review of what they do, and he'll tell more about that at April 1st. But it's really incredible, and that we've gone this long without having a handle on that knowledge is really a shame. And so he's really taken the bull by the horns, so to speak. And we're really lucky. He came from Napa. He was the executive director of Napa's LAFCO. And he came down here.
I had promised you all a chance to do a final wrap-up statement, and we're at the end of our time
Susan,
for
can I ask one
this
quick
part.
question?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm a planning commissioner for the city of Novato. When LAFCO finishes this water analysis, how can we be sure to, as planning commissioners and city council members in our own communities, that we have this report, that we get this report, so that it can help influence our decision-making, our recommendations at our own city level?
Everybody should be getting that report. Every water district should be getting it. But all you need to do is just email Keene and say, please make sure that our planning commission or you personally get a copy of this.
Do you have an idea when it might be finished?
He just started a few months ago, and it's probably going to be, he's hoping to get around summertime. Some other things delayed, but summertime down as far as Santu, Larkspur, Corte Madera. But to get it all together, the project's going to probably take him a couple of years maybe. But with being that he's doing Novato first, that's what he's starting right now. So I would just email him.
I asked because we had a water availability report that was put together at the city level, and it was interesting, but it didn't really answer any questions. So it would be interesting to see somebody else's research on the same issue.
Yeah, but he is really responsive. And so all you need to do is just, let him know that you would like to see the results, and it'll happen.
Okay, so let's move into final wrap-up comments, and let's just go in reverse this time. Pam, we'll give you a chance to start.
So, with my experience in planning as an elected for the Roscoe Sanitary District, I feel very comfortable if I were to move into the LAFCO role. see a lot of issues coming up, a lot of studies, a lot of municipal service reviews, and I just feel that I have a voice for all the people, not just about consolidation or one particular issue. I have a really way to look at the big picture, the quality of life for the community, and I would be very honored to serve if I'm chosen. Thank you.
We spent a lot of time tonight using the word consolidation. In my view, and I was intimately involved, in my view, that minimizes the reasons for having LAFCO. LAFCO should be in a position to listen to what the local constituents have as their issues and their concerns affecting their environment, and then support those to a large degree. Doesn't mean shutting out other groups, but it does mean giving priority for people talking about local issues and controlling their environment. Whether that happens to be traffic in southern Marin and Mill Valley, or high-density housing in Corte Madera, or smart trains in San Rafael, or whatever. I believe that those local issues need to be heard and need to be given a high priority in groups like LAFCO considering taking action. And if I'm in that position to do that, I certainly will do that through outreach and listening to those who come to speak to LAFCO. I have experience with LAFCO. I have experience with other government bodies. I'm not a government wonk. I haven't grown up doing government things. As I mentioned before, I've been in high tech running companies. And I just believe that's the best thing for Marin and best thing for all of Marin's residents. And I would pledge to do that if I'm elected to the position. So, thank you.
I think it's clear tonight that LAFCO often deals with many issues that are of, especially now, great concern to our local residents. I think that's why it's paramount that any of our representatives, whether it's council members, supervisors, special district members, are really involved with the community, speaking with residents. That's something I've continually done since even before serving on our district board. It's something I enjoy doing and will continue to do. And I think it's with an agency that is as important as LAFCO is, and with what they do, just that much more important to really focus on the voice of the people who are most closely impacted to whatever issue is going on. I think we see oftentimes many residents or interest groups all want to have their opinion heard or followed regarding a particular issue, but I think it all really comes down to who is going to be most deeply impacted, and so I think it's important to give priority to what the residents want, and then go down the line in terms of ensuring responsible development and orderly growth.
As a member of the 2009-10 grand jury, Marin Civil Grand Jury, we did a report on the boards and commissions of Marin, and it was totally correct. Nobody knows all the boards and commissions of Marin. It's a ridiculous situation, and I commend the current administration of LAFCO to at least get a handle on that. The word consolidation is not really the right word. The right word is efficiency. To have Ross Valley suing San Rafael over San Quentin, or us suing Point Tiburon for the attorneys charging us $50-some thousand and getting $90,000 after 20 years of litigation. These sorts of things need to be made efficient, and I think that consolidation or discussion of that is a good thing. But what we're really looking for is efficiencies, and if we don't have some sort of efficiencies, again, we're not going to have a national highway service. We're going to have all these little podunk little areas that say not in my backyard, not here, not here. And what I'm saying is that we need to have some efficiencies. Now, with respect to the water, having spent so many years in the water department, they need to look at gray water. And the single biggest expense in water is pumping the water, the electricity to pump the water. So when you start saying you have too much water, you don't have enough water, it's the pumping of that water that is the expense. And really what they want to do in this county is, Marin Municipal is really bound and determined to overbuild, and then build a desalinization plant. And I'm really sorry to hear that.
So on that note, for another topic that we will address another time, John, Justin, Carlin, Lou, Pam, thank you so much for coming and taking time to be with us tonight.